I never believed in the supernatural. As a journalist specializing in debunking urban legends and paranormal claims, I'd seen my fair share of hoaxes and easily explained phenomena. But what happened to me during my investigation of the abandoned Ravencrest Asylum would shake my skepticism to its very core. It all started with an email from an anonymous source. The subject line read, "True Terrifying Horror Stories, Ravencrest Asylum." Normally, I dismiss such a vague tip, but something about the detailed account inside piqued my interest. The sender claimed to be a former orderly at the asylum, which had been shuttered for decades due to allegations of patient abuse and unethical experiments. Against my better judgment, I decided to follow up on the lead. A week later, I found myself standing before the imposing gates of Ravencrest Asylum, the setting sun casting long shadows across its decaying facade. The air felt heavy, charged with an energy I couldn't explain. As I pushed open the rusted gates, a chill ran down my spine. I chalked it up to the cool evening air and my own apprehension. Armed with my camera, voice recorder, and flashlight, I stepped into the overgrown courtyard. The asylum loomed before me, its windows dark and empty, like the hollow eyes of a skull. I took a deep breath and approached the main entrance. The door creaked open with surprising ease, as if inviting me in. The interior was a maze of dimly lit corridors and abandoned rooms. Peeling wallpaper hung in strips, and the air was thick with the musty scent of decay. I began my systematic exploration, documenting everything with my camera. As I ventured deeper into the asylum, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Shadows seemed to move in my peripheral vision, always disappearing when I turned to look. I told myself it was just my imagination, fueled by the eerie atmosphere. In what appeared to be an old patient room, I found a journal wedged behind a rotting dresser. The pages were filled with frantic scribbles, detailing horrific experiments and otherworldly entities. I dismissed it as the ravings of a disturbed mind, but a nagging doubt began to creep in. Suddenly, my flashlight flickered and died. In the pitch darkness, I heard a whisper, so faint I almost missed it, "You shouldn't be here." My heart raced as I fumbled for my phone, using its screen for light. The weak glow illuminated a figure at the end of the hall, a woman in a tattered nurse's uniform, her face obscured by shadows. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. "I'm a journalist. I'm just here to investigate some stories about this place." The figure didn't respond. Instead, it began to move towards me with an unnatural, jerky gait. As it got closer, I realized with horror that its feet weren't touching the ground. I ran. My footsteps echoed through the empty corridors as I desperately searched for an exit. Doors slammed shut around me, and I could hear whispers growing louder, a cacophony of tormented voices filling the air. I burst into what looked like an operating theater. Ancient medical equipment lay scattered about, and a heavy copper smell hung in the air. In the center of the room stood an operating table, and on it lay a body covered by a sheet. As I watched, paralyzed with fear, the sheet began to move. Slowly, it slid off, revealing not a corpse, but a creature that defied description. Its flesh seemed to shift and writhe, never settling on a single form. A voice boomed in my head, drowning out my thoughts. "We've been waiting for you, skeptic. Come, let us show you the truth." Tentacle-like appendages shot out from the creature, wrapping around my arms and legs. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the oppressive silence of the asylum. Just as I felt myself being dragged towards the abomination, my phone rang. The shrill sound cut through the supernatural silence, and suddenly, everything stopped. The creature, the whispers, the feeling of dread all vanished in an instant. I found myself lying on the floor of an empty, dusty room. My flashlight flickered back to life, and my phone showed a missed call from an unknown number. Shaken to my core, I staggered out of the asylum. The night air had never felt so sweet. As I reached my car, I noticed a piece of paper tucked under the windshield wiper. With trembling hands, I unfolded it. In messy handwriting, it read, "What you experienced was just the beginning. The true horrors of Ravencrest are still waiting to be uncovered. Will you be brave enough to return?" I crumpled the note and tossed it away, my mind reeling. As a rational person, I wanted to dismiss everything as an elaborate hoax or a stress-induced hallucination. But deep down, I knew what I had seen and felt was real. As I drove away from Ravencrest Asylum, my rearview mirror showed the building silhouetted against the night sky. For a moment, I could have sworn I saw a figure standing in one of the windows, watching me leave. The following weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and paranoid days. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled upon something far beyond my understanding. My dreams were plagued by visions of shifting creatures and echoing whispers. I tried to resume my normal life, to focus on debunking other, less terrifying stories. But Ravencrest Asylum haunted me. I found myself obsessively researching its history, uncovering layers of disturbing information that had been buried over the years. Reports of missing persons in the area spanning decades. Accounts from former patients that had been dismissed as delusions. Theories about secret government experiments in interdimensional travel. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that what I had experienced might just be the tip of a very dark iceberg. One night, as I was poring over old newspaper clippings, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "The asylum misses you. The truth is waiting. Come back, and all will be revealed." I stared at the message, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to throw my phone away, to run as far from Ravencrest and its mysteries as I could. But another part, a part one was afraid to acknowledge, felt drawn back to that place of nightmares. As I sat there, wrestling with my fear and my curiosity, I realized that I had a choice to make. I could try to forget what I had seen, to go back to my life of comfortable skepticism. Or I could dive deeper into the abyss, knowing that what I found might change me forever. My finger hovered over the reply button. Whatever I decided, I knew one thing for certain: the horrors of Ravencrest Asylum were real, and they were waiting for me. Just as I was about to respond, my laptop screen flickered. For a split second, I saw a reflection that wasn't my own, a face twisted in agony, its mouth open in a silent scream. I spun around, but my apartment was empty. When I looked back at my laptop, the screen was normal. But a new document had opened, containing a single sentence: "The choice is yours, but remember, once you've seen the truth, there's no going back." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and made my decision. Little did I know, it would be a choice that would not only change my life, but potentially unravel the very fabric of reality as I knew it. With shaking hands, I replied to the text, "I'm coming back. Show me the truth." As soon as I hit send, the lights in my apartment began to flicker. Shadows danced on the walls, taking on impossible shapes. And in the distance, I could have sworn I heard the faint sound of asylum doors creaking open, welcoming me back to the nightmare. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, my mind racing with possibilities and fears. What horrors awaited me at Ravencrest? What truths would I uncover? And more importantly, would I survive the experience with my sanity intact? As I stepped out into the night, the world around me seemed different somehow. The shadows were deeper, the silence more oppressive. I could feel eyes upon me, not just human eyes, but something older, something hungry. I got into my car and started the engine. As I pulled away from my apartment, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing on my balcony, the same nurse from the asylum, her empty eyes following me as I drove away. The road to Ravencrest was dark and winding. As I got closer, my radio began to pick up strange frequencies, snatches of conversations in languages I didn't recognize, interspersed with bursts of static that sounded almost like screams. Finally, the asylum came into view, its silhouette a dark blot against the starry sky. I parked outside the gates, which now stood open as if expecting me. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy that made my skin crawl. As I approached the entrance, the doors swung open of their own accord. A voice, carried on a non-existent wind, whispered, "Welcome back, seeker of truth. Your journey into the heart of terror begins now." I stepped over the threshold, leaving the world I knew behind. Whatever lay ahead in the depths of Ravencrest Asylum, I knew my life would never be the same. The true horror was just beginning, and I was walking into it willingly. The doors slammed shut behind me, the sound echoing through the empty corridors. I was committed now. There was no turning back. What truths would I uncover in the depths of this place? What horrors awaited me? And more importantly, would I survive to tell the tale? As I moved towards the light, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They spoke of ancient secrets, of realities beyond human comprehension, of truths that could shatter minds. I pressed on, my heart pounding in my chest. Whatever lay ahead, I was determined to face it. The true story of Ravencrest Asylum was waiting to be told, and I would be the one to tell it if I survived. The pulsing light grew brighter, and I could make out a doorway ahead. As I approached, I realized that the light wasn't coming from the other side of the door, but from the door itself. It seemed to be made of pure energy, shimmering and shifting in a way that hurt my eyes to look at directly. I reached out, my hand trembling, and touched the surface of the door. It felt both scorching hot and freezing cold, a paradox that sent shivers down my spine. As my fingers made contact, visions flashed through my mind, glimpses of other worlds, of beings beyond description, of truths too vast for human minds to comprehend. The door began to open, slowly revealing what lay beyond. As light spilled out, blinding in its intensity, I heard a voice, not a whisper this time, but a booming proclamation that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Behold, mortal. The truth you seek lies beyond. But remember, knowledge comes at a price. Are you willing to pay it?" I stood on the threshold, poised between the world I knew and the unknown horrors that awaited. In that moment, I realized that this was more than just an investigation. It was a journey that would challenge everything I thought I knew about reality, about myself, about the nature of truth and terror. With a deep breath, I stepped through the door, leaving behind the last vestiges of my old life. Whatever lay ahead, whatever horrors I would face, I was committed to uncovering the truth. As the light engulfed me, I heard the asylum itself seem to exhale, as if satisfied that another seeker had taken the plunge into its depths. The door closed behind me with a finality that echoed through dimensions. My journey into the heart of true terror had begun. And somewhere in the depths of Ravencrest Asylum, ancient entities stirred, awakening to the presence of a new player in their eternal game of horror and revelation. The true story was about to unfold, and I was now a part of it, for better or for worse. As the blinding light faded, I found myself in a place that defied description. The walls pulsed with an otherworldly energy, and the floor beneath my feet seemed to shift and undulate like a living thing. Reality itself felt thin here, as if it could tear at any moment. I stumbled forward, my senses overwhelmed by the alien environment. Whispers echoed from every direction, a cacophony of voices speaking in languages both ancient and impossible. As my eyes adjusted to the strange, pulsating light, I saw shapes moving in the shadows, twisted forms that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. "Welcome, seeker," a voice boomed, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You stand at the threshold of truth. But be warned, knowledge has a price, and some truths were never meant for mortal minds." I tried to speak, but found my voice caught in my throat. The air was thick, almost liquid, and breathing felt like drowning. Panic began to set in as I realized the full weight of what I had done. I had willingly stepped into a realm beyond human comprehension, and there was no guarantee I would ever find my way back. As I struggled to regain my composure, a figure emerged from the shifting shadows. It was the nurse I had seen before, but now I could see her clearly, and I almost wished I couldn't. Her form was a nightmarish amalgamation of human and something else, her flesh rippling and changing as if it couldn't decide on a single shape. "You seek answers," she said, her voice a discordant blend of whispers. "Come. Let me show you the true history of Ravencrest." She extended a hand, or what passed for a hand in this twisted reality, and I found myself taking it, despite every instinct screaming at me to run. The moment our flesh made contact, visions flooded my mind. I saw Ravencrest as it once was, not just an asylum, but a focal point of reality, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. I witnessed secret experiments conducted in hidden chambers, scientists and occultists working together to pierce the boundaries of our dimension. But they had gone too far. In their arrogance, they had opened a door that should have remained closed, inviting entities of unimaginable power and malevolence into our world. The patients of Ravencrest became unwilling test subjects, their minds and bodies warped by exposure to these otherworldly forces. I saw the aftermath, the cover-up, the shuttering of the asylum, the desperate attempts to contain what had been unleashed. But it was too late. Ravencrest had become a wound in reality, a festering portal through which horrors beyond imagination could seep into our world. As the visions faded, I found myself on my knees, gasping for air. The nurse thing stood over me, her form continuing to shift and change. "Now you see," she said. "But this is only the beginning. The entities that were awakened here have been waiting, growing stronger. And now, they're ready to break free." "What do they want?" I managed to choke out. The nurse's face split into a grotesque smile, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. "Everything. Your world, your reality, your very essence. And you, Seeker, have just given them the key they needed." Horror washed over me as I realized the truth. My presence here, my willingness to see beyond the veil, had weakened the already fragile barriers holding these entities at bay. I wasn't just an observer, I was an unwitting accomplice in potentially unleashing untold horrors upon the world. "No," I whispered, struggling to my feet. "There has to be a way to stop this." The nurse laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Stop it? You can't stop what's already been set in motion. But perhaps you can guide it." Before I could ask what she meant, the world around us began to shift. The walls melted away, revealing a vast, impossible space filled with swirling vortexes of energy. In the center stood what looked like an ancient stone altar, covered in symbols that hurt my eyes to look at directly. "The choice is yours," the nurse said, gesturing towards the altar. "Embrace the power that's been offered, become a conduit for the entities, and you might be able to influence what comes next. Or refuse, and watch helplessly as your world is torn apart." I approached the altar, my mind reeling. This couldn't be real. It had to be some sort of hallucination, a mental breakdown brought on by stress and fear. But deep down, I knew the truth. This was all too real, and the fate of everything I knew hung in the balance. As I stood before the altar, I felt a presence, no, multiple presences pressing against the edges of my consciousness. Ancient, vast, and utterly alien, they whispered promises of power and knowledge beyond my wildest dreams. "Choose," the nurse hissed, her form beginning to dissolve into the swirling energies around us. "Before it's too late." I placed my hands on the altar, and the world exploded into chaos. Energy surged through me, tearing me apart and remaking me in ways I couldn't comprehend. I screamed, but the sound was lost in the roar of realities colliding. Visions assaulted me, glimpses of possible futures, of worlds where the entities had broken through completely. I saw cities warped into impossible geometries, oceans of writhing flesh, skies filled with eyes that watched and judged. But I also saw pockets of resistance, humans and other beings fighting back against the encroaching chaos. As the visions faded, I found myself back in the asylum, but it was changed. The walls were covered in shifting, living symbols, and the air itself seemed to pulse with otherworldly energy. I looked down at my hands and saw that they too had changed, my flesh now swirling with the same symbols that covered the walls. I stumbled to a window and caught my reflection. My eyes were now swirling vortexes of light, and my entire body seemed to flicker in and out of reality. I had become something more than human, a bridge between worlds. As I stood there, trying to come to terms with what I had become, I felt them, the entities, pressing against the thinning veil of reality. They were coming, drawn by the power I now possessed. But I also felt something else, a connection to the world I had left behind, to the people I had known. I realized then that this was my purpose. I couldn't stop what was coming, but perhaps I could guide it. Perhaps I could be the buffer between these cosmic horrors and the unsuspecting world, helping humanity adapt to a new reality rather than being consumed by it. As the first cracks began to appear in the fabric of reality, I steeled myself for what was to come. The true horror was just beginning, but so was a new chapter in the history of our world. And I would be there to witness it all, to chronicle the terror and the wonder of a universe far vaster and more terrifying than we had ever imagined. The walls of the asylum began to crumble, revealing glimpses of other dimensions beyond. I heard screams not just from our world, but from countless others. The invasion had begun. I stepped out of what remained of Ravencrest, my new form allowing me to see the truth of what was happening. The sky was torn open, revealing a writhing mass of tentacles and eyes. Buildings warped and twisted, taking on impossible shapes. And everywhere, people ran in terror, their minds unable to comprehend the horrors now unleashed upon the world. But even as chaos reigned, I felt a sense of purpose. I was no longer just a journalist seeking the truth. I had become something more, a guardian, a guide, a chronicler of the apocalypse. As I walked through the streets of the transforming world, I began to gather others, those whose minds hadn't shattered in the face of cosmic horror. I told them what I knew, prepared them for what was to come. Some called me a prophet, others a monster. But I knew I was something in between, forever caught between two worlds. Years passed, though time had little meaning in this new reality. The world as we knew it was gone, replaced by a nightmare landscape of blended dimensions and realities. But humanity survived, adapted. We carved out enclaves in this new world, learning to harness the strange energies that now permeated everything. And through it all, I watched and recorded. My transformed body didn't age, didn't die. I became a living record of this new era, guiding generation after generation through the terrors and wonders of our changed world. But even as I helped humanity find its footing in this new reality, I never forgot the price of my knowledge. Every night, in my dreams, I returned to that moment in Ravencrest Asylum, standing before the altar. And every night, I wondered, had I made the right choice? As I stand here now, looking out over a city that defies the laws of physics, watching humans and entities from beyond the stars live side by side, I still don't have an answer. The horror of what was unleashed that day has never fully faded. But neither has the wonder, the terrible beauty of a universe far vaster and more complex than we had ever imagined. And so, I continue my vigil, a living bridge between what was and what is. The story of Ravencrest Asylum, of the truth I sought and the price I paid, lives on through me. It serves as a warning and a beacon, a reminder that there are some truths that come at a terrible cost, but also that humanity can endure and adapt to even the most horrific changes. As I pen these words, I feel the stirring of something vast and ancient, a reminder that our struggle is far from over. New horrors await on the horizon, new challenges that will test the limits of our adaptation and understanding. But I'll be there, as I always have been, to bear witness, to guide, to remember. For I am the chronicler of the apocalypse, the guardian of terrible truths. And my story, like the horrors it contains, is far from over. In the distance, I hear a sound, a low, rumbling roar that seems to shake the very foundations of reality. Something new is coming, something that even the entities I've come to know fear. I close my journal and stand, my form shimmering with otherworldly energy. Whatever comes next, I'll face it as I've faced everything since that fateful day in Ravencrest Asylum, with open eyes and a determination to uncover the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. As I step out into the twisted landscape that was once our world, I can't help but smile. The true horror, it seems, is only just beginning. And I wouldn't have it any other way.